All right, we're back, and it's COMP305. It's week 3, lesson 3, part 4 for this build your own mail pilot series, right? Let's kind of go back into Unity for a second, and review what we've gotten so far. So far, again, we've got our clouds running. For most part, most people got this done. If you haven't got this, you can always download the stuff from GitHub to kind of start off where I am. For people who are using Unity 4, I know that this project is geared towards Unity 5, and what you'd have to do is basically create it from scratch, and don't download it from GitHub. Just download the scripts, because the scripts should work almost the same. There's a couple of things that are different in Unity 4 and Unity 5 in terms of script, and the main thing is this get component object that we see here. If I go back into my island controller script, here it is, you might see something like this: get game object.transform, and that might be enough for you in Unity 4. This get component generic that we're using here, what this is a list collection. It's an array list, right? This array list, what we've called, or display list, if you will, that's really what it is, of game components, right? Has been added into Unity 5 as a requirement. So Unity 5, this is what it looks like. Unity 4, you have to modify this piece of code right here to make it go. So that's one thing that you may need to change, right? Sometimes it works as is, though, and that's pretty good. So in terms of changes, we don't do a lot. If you were going from Unity 4 to Unity 5, Unity would actually recommend the changes and do it for you, which is kind of cool. Sometimes that happens if you're using Unity 5. But unfortunately, if you're one of those who don't have access, then that would be an issue. Okay, so let's look at this now. So we've got most of the pieces that we need to make this game good. For the remainder of this session, I want to kind of make the player controller work. All right, so how do we do that? Because we really don't have any motion on our player right now. We don't even have our player controller script in play whatsoever. So this is a great place to add it in. Some of you, from a game development perspective, may have made the player work first. That's the way we do things. We kind of make the player work, we know how to move, and then we add everything else. I kind of work backwards here for a couple reasons. We already kind of know how to make the player move, right? We already did that, and we did that in another tutorial last week, right? In fact, if you look up online, and if I go to our Centennial College here, if I go here, and if I go down to lesson 2, here's lesson 2, right? That's the wrong one. Let's go to lesson 2 online for 305. How about that? Ha ha ha. Do I even have that online? That would be bad. Let's just see if I don't have it online. So we'll go COMP305. I do not, right? That's bad. So let me add kind of the script for you online. I'm going to kind of type this script a little quicker than before. We kind of went over it, though, and I showed it to you from last week. In fact, I have it here. You may have been doing the tutorial with me. I have it here in my my scripts under my Unity project. So I'm going to go to Unity projects. We kind of did this last day, and if not, I'll just upload this to GitHub for you, right? But basically, in Unity COMP305, I have another set of scripts, and one of them is this player controller script we worked on last week, right? I don't know if you guys remember, with the block, move the block around, right? And it was just a cube. That same game controller idea, and I'm going to open up here in Text Wrangler for a second, right? Here's my player controller. I can't use all of this, because this script isn't accurate for what we need for my player controller. For example, I don't need to move vertically in any way. My mail pilot is going to be locked to that one piece of his screen on the bottom of his screen. He can't move forward and back or up and down on the screen. He can only move left and right. Right? That's my limitations to make the game hard. Right? If I can move anywhere I wanted, makes the game too easy. Right? Okay, so let's do this. Let's take this script, and I'm going to quickly put it in play by copying everything, and then I'll upload it to GitHub really quickly so you have it. Okay, so instead of you having to type all this again, like we did this all last week, if you watch the video, it's there, right? So I'm going to kind of copy this, and I'm going to go into MonoDevelop here. But before I do that, my player doesn't have a script component. I'm going to add a component. I'm going to go New Scripts, call this a player script or player controller. Sorry, be okay. And then, hanging out in no man's land here in the root, I'm going to take my player controller script and kind of pull it into my scripts folder. There it is. Now it's going to be different than the other ones. And when I go into MonoDevelop, you're going to see if I copy it from I'm using Text Wrangler, just a text editor. If I copy it in here, we might have some issues. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So here's my copy. All right. Well, one thing is I have this public move vector, right? I'm moving it. I'm starting it off. I'm kind of initializing it at 0, 0. That's the first thing, right? And then I've got my new position and all this kind of stuff. Let us do a couple of things here. Let me just save this thing, right? I'm leaving it as is. I'm not changing anything in my script at all. Leaving it as is. And then I'm going to update GitHub for you guys so you have it. So I'm going to go into, I've saved it. I'm going to go into mail pilot demo here. I'm going to go here to git add dot, git commit -m. So it's going to be an interim push. Added player controller script. That's what I kind of done, right? You guys can have it. You don't have to type it. And there's a reason for this. Git push origin master, just so that we save some time. Really, that's what it's around. Okay, so you guys should have, if you go to GitHub, you can get the access to this script now. It's up online, so you don't have to type it out. There are a couple issues with this one, okay? If I was to run this thing as is, the way it is right now, all right? My question to you is, would it work, right? So I've just kind of copied it from before. We use it on the block, right? So here's my player, and I've got my move. I've got my move that says 0, and my y is up and down. That's 0. I want to make my move a value. I'm going to add, like maybe I'll make my value 2 as an example. So a smaller value for my player, right? Like a move of 2 pixels per frame, that kind of thing. And then I want to run this thing and see what happens. First of all, let's check the console for any errors, right? And I'm going to press play, and then I'm going to use my keys to move my player's, a plane around. Okay. There's a bit of a drift that happens with my plane, so that's kind of good, right? A bit of flickering too that goes on, right? If you notice, so did you see the flickering? I definitely see it. Anybody? A bit of flicker that goes on with my player's object. Now it works, right? This is how it works now, and I can kind of maneuver. At 2, it's pretty slow. I can tell you that it's hard to play at 2. I'm gonna get hurt a lot, right? Let's make it 3. Because 3 might be the right value. So I'm changing it to 3, right? And let's see if I can move my player object a little quicker, right? So there's 3. I don't know if 3 is playable, but 3 gives me a little bit of other issues. It drifts a little bit more than I want it to because I don't have complete control. When I take my finger off the button kind of stuff, right, it continues to react. It goes 3, and then it's much more, a little bit of time for it to slow down, like almost like I've got a bit of a drift going on, right? I don't know if that makes any sense. Take a look. So if try with 3. So I'm just making it go, moving my player craft around. I'm just testing it right now to see what the issue is, and now I'm dead. See, like it's a really hard game with 3. I don't want to go much higher than this, and I'll tell you why. If I move to 5, and we did this last night as an example. Click back here. Now it's good, but it kind of moves off screen too. Whoa, look what happened here. Like my player kind of, like she's gone, right? When I come back, it's off screen. I can kind of cheat that way, right? Like if I go to my scene, see my player's craft is here, right? My avatar. If I go back to game, move them off screen, right? Am I getting hit? No, right? I'm not getting hit by anything right now. It's off screen, right? So I need to create a boundary so my player can't leave the screen in any way. And we got to script that up. This is where I'm going to need you on concept board in a second. Okay. I'm also going to need to kind of solidify my my script a little bit because my script sucks, right? It needs to be a little clearer. By the way, if I add in, so I think 2 or 3 might be okay. I don't think anything greater than 3. 5, it might be too much from a drift perspective. If I add Y in there right now, right, it does allow me to use kind of forward motion as well, and it kind of moves my object in different directions. But you know what? It looks weird. Like my ship shouldn't work like, or my plane shouldn't be able to go back, right, up and down like this. It's kind of a weird kind of motion. Although not that I haven't seen it in video games before, right? But not by the way that it makes it any easier for you. In fact, if anything, it makes it harder for you if you come up here, right? So I don't want to give it the ability to come up here. So I want to take away this value. That's one thing I want to do. Right, so some modifications we got to do with scripts. All right, so let's go back. So 2 things. Let's move this to 0, just so we remember. By the way, anyone have difficulty installing my script that you got from GitHub? If you don't, you shouldn't have any difficulty. Just as is, it should work for you, right? But let's go in and take a look at this and see what we're doing, okay? Because this is the problem, all right? So we've got this vector2, which is a move. Now, I've called it a vector2. That's one thing that's weird, right? That's a little different than what we did when we did system serializable stuff, when we created a class that gives two move values, number one. That's one. Second thing is I've got this new position vector, right, that I made private. And you know what? It's not in line with our convention. This shouldn't be named new position. It should be underscore new position. So let's just double click this. I'm going to right click, refactor, rename, right? And we're going to call this thing underscore new position, right, as a private vector. That's the first thing. In that, when we do that, I want to put the this keyword in here, right? So this dot underscore new position. I want to use the this keyword because this is kind of best practice for us too to understand what I'm talking about. What position am I saying, right? Same thing here. Follow me here. Here, here, and other places too. Like over anywhere where I want to use a new position here, here, here. And you know what? I'm already finding issues here, right? Hey, let me ask you this question. Do I need to change my position every time? These are if statements that are going to happen one after the other, right? These if statements, right? So I've got if statement, if, and then I change my position every time, right? And this is happening in frame, like on update, right? Which is every frame. Do I really need to do this after every if statement, or can I do it once? What do you think, guys? Well, that's one thing. I probably don't need to, so I probably can wipe these away. So let's just do a little bit of refactoring here. So I get rid of this. I get rid of this one. I don't need these two, right? Because I'm not going to move up and down. The vertical ability for me to move vertically, I can get rid of altogether. But let's save one of my lines here, right? I'm going to cut this one out and put it at the bottom of my script, like this, outside of my if statement, and kill these things, okay? So now I've got this script. This is my script that I've got. I've kind of killed the other ones, taken this new position stuff out, and I only can go, I can only move right and left right now, okay? I don't need my debug.log telling me that the player entered the scene either. So let's get rid of this. All right, so that, my start method is kind of useless, but for now we'll leave it as is. Okay, cool. The other thing is that I never want to do this. This is bad form for me. I don't want to, in my update, I want to try and avoid putting some code directly in my update. I want to make it so that I call a method. And I want the method to be private, right? So let's make a private method, right? Down at the bottom here, I'll make it so it's private, and return void, and I'm going to use the underscore, and it's going to be called, we're going to call this check input, because that's what we're doing. We're checking the input to see if the player moves or not, right? That's my check input method. And I want to call this in my update, but I want to take all this stuff, this new stuff, blah, 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 all this, cut it, and put it inside my check input method, right? Just from a encapsulation perspective, right? Now this new position, right? I want to put it in. So I'm going to say this dot underscore check input. I want to kind of do that. I want to kind of call my check input method to see if I've got input, right? I'm breaking it out this way for you. So this is to understand kind of my view of best practices. Okay, so let's see. We made some changes to my script. Let's see if it still works as is without making additional changes. I've just kind of refactored a little bit. And every time I refactor, I want to make sure my script is working. So I'm going to go back to Unity now and press play and make sure that my player can still move around, right? So I can still move around. I can't move up or down. I got this value that I'm kind of concerned of. It's kind of useless to make it a vector. I'm probably going to get rid of it as a vector, right? Okay, so that's the next piece. But it allows me to move around pretty good. I still flicker, which is I'm concerned about the flickering, right? Here's my flickering. I'm going to drift too. Depending on how much I touch, it's very sensitive. If I touch a little bit, I move a little bit. If I touch a lot, then I drift more, right? It kind of remembers how much I'm drifting, right? Is there a better way to do this? And how do I control my boundaries? That boundary is something I need, right? Okay, so that's kind of a couple things here. Let's go back to my player script. One is this. my move now, I don't need it to be a value between one move and another move. I want it to be one value, right? I don't need it to be two values, x and y, right? Or min-max, if you will, or something like that. So this move value can change from a vector into a float, right? And I'm going to just get rid of this altogether and put it here like this. That's the one thing I want to change so far. Okay, now if I go back to Unity, and if I click away from the player and back, you notice that my move is the same. How come? How come? How come? If I go back to the console, it says there's a problem, right? Type float does not contain a definition, right? You know, for what I'm doing. It says, here's the error I'm getting. It says, type float does not contain a definition for x and no extension method of x. Why? Because I've killed it here, but somewhere down here I'm using move x, which is not what I want, right? So I want to kill this. I want to kill the x down here and down here because I'm not changing my x value. I'm just adding motion. The x, I'm adding this move or subtracting the move depending on which side I'm moving, which way I'm moving to my new position value, this vector that I'm going to add in, that I'm going to kind of modify my transform position component later on, right? So I don't need to do an x and y value there. There's only one x. There's only one value, and it's just I'm only affecting the x, so that's fixing that. Let me go back to my code now. That should clear up. There it goes. Now let's check it out. I won't move at all, right? Because I didn't modify my move value. There's only one value there, right? So let's go back and put a 3 in there, right, and save it. Okay, so now my player has a move of 3, right? Okay, that's good. And this is okay. You can call this move. You can call this speed. Hey, you know what? Speed makes more sense than move, right? So I think that might be the better way to call it. Let us refactor this one more time. So I'm going to go back in here and then rename this thing from move to speed, lowercase s, right? I want to use the uppercase s because I got to be careful because it's a class that's part of my stuff. Oh man, I changed it here, but I didn't change it anywhere else. Let's do a refactor, right? Refactor, rename. Rename this thing speed, right? And that's a little better because what it does, it goes through my code and renames everything everywhere. That's why refactoring is better. All right, go back to Unity. If you notice, I click away and click back, and now it becomes speed. The speed resets to 0. I need to move it to 3, right? And now I've got my script a little bit nicer than it was. I need to add another component, and I'm going to go to concept board here to understand. I want to do this. This is what I want to do. Okay, so I want to translate. This is the problem. Remember, whenever you have a script to add, you get a problem, and you get to translate your solution in code. Okay, the problem is when I use my player object, so here's my scene, and here's my ship, here's my player object, my ship or my avatar, call it what you like. Here's my avatar, this is my avatar, right? I want to, when I move off screen, this is what I want it to do. As I move off to this position, right, here's my ultimately left position. When I get to minus 290 or positive 290, I want my player object to stop and not receive any more input. Okay, or not be allowed to cross over this border. I never want it to go outside of this border. I want it to stop gracefully. Here's what I don't want it to do. And this is what happened last time when we did it. I don't want it to do this. Right? I don't want it to do this. That can happen too if you script it incorrectly. All right, so I want it to go from minus 290 to 290. So do you have an idea of what to do to make this generic, first of all? This minus 290 to 290. I want to do some kind of border check, right? Do we have a class we can use that's already made, right? And what would you do? Let's go to concept board and let's see what you think about from a solution perspective. Okay, so I'm going to go here to concept board. I want to make sure that my ship can be stopped at the border, right? Just like if I cross the border, they're going to check my ID, right? They're going to check my passport and say, nope, you can't cross. I don't have access to go into the border of the other part of the game world. My game world ends at the ocean, right? After the ocean, there's just death for the player. All right? Actually, you just can't go there. He's presented. He's in a box, right? There's actually some really interesting solutions to this. One of them is a physics solution, right? Where I actually physically put a border around the entire object, right? Like a box that's invisible to the game, right? And he bounces off the box. That's one physics solution. Some people may try and do that, right? Their solution is to actually stop me from going there. Now we have this boundary. We can certainly use the boundary, and some people have suggested we use this. I'm just going to move this object around. So I'm going to go to create here. I'm going to move this little sticky around so we can see the boundary. That's one suggestion. We can definitely use the boundary because we already got a boundary, right? If you notice this boundary, we can still implement the boundary because min x, it won't be x min, it'll be x min and x max, not this, but close enough. It'll be it's already system serializable, so I don't have to redeclare the class. I can just use the class boundary and declare only my x's. I don't care about my y's. I can leave my y's blank because I'm just reusing part of the class. That's okay, right? That's one option. But how do I check to see that I've surpassed my boundary, and how do I stop my ship or my avatar from even going there? It won't be able to go past the boundary, right? Remember that my x and y coordinates from my game object, my vehicle, are in the direct center. That's the trick. Here's a hint if you want to try this out, right? So the direct middle, or the focal point, the registration point of my object is in the middle, right? So if I say x and y coordinate of the object, that's not really accurate because that means I'm checking the middle. That means it's already half out of the screen. Okay, I don't want to check the object when it's half out of the screen. I want to check it before it even gets there. Hint, hint. How do I do that? Anyone have any suggestions from a code perspective? And so far I see a couple of stickies, but I got no suggestions. Right? Come on, guys. Let's think this through. Right? I'm checking. Let's do one thing at a time, actually. You know what? I'll let you guys do the stickies in the background. I'm going to put this system serializable boundary class in play, right, in my player controller object. And this is the wrong one. Let's go back to here. And at the top, where I have my public instance variables of speed, right, I also want to have something called boundary. And I can do that by doing this. Public boundary with a B. Look how it comes up now because it is a system serializable class that I used. Boundary with a B, and then lowercase boundary, right? Okay, that's my boundary. So I have my boundary check. Let's see what it looks like on Unity. If I click away and click back, I have my boundary now, right? And I can assign my minimum is minus 290. Let's just check that out again. Minus 290, right? And 290. I don't want it to go beyond 290, from 290 to minus 290 or whatever, right? So let's go to 0. I'll put those in there. So that's part of it. Part of the solution is what I just did. Minus 290 to 290. Don't worry about the y min and y max. We don't care about those. This can remain at 0. That's just part of that's our new property we've defined, this new boundary property, if you will. I'm going to save that. Still doesn't do anything, right? How do I do a check? And when do I do it? Oh, that's the other option, right? So I'm here, I'm checking to see, I'm moving around, right? What do I want to check first of all? I want to check my new position, right? I want to check my new position. And I want to, before I actually do my transform, before I do this, right? I want to say if then my new position, whatever I'm clicking to, right? When I adjust my position is outside the boundary, I want to make it so that my ship is touching the boundary, right? So that I can't go beyond 290, right? Because 290, minus 290 is the middle of my ship, my middle of my little plane, right? Minus 290 is the middle. I don't want it to ever go beyond 290, okay? If it goes beyond 290, something's wrong. It's not going to look right, and my player can cheat. We don't want my player to cheat, right? Okay, I'm going to go back to concept board for a bit and see if you guys can come up with a solution. And no one's posted anything. Come on. Are you guys not watching? Come on, you guys are killing me, right? I can't do it all myself. Then it's just you guys watching and me doing. That's not good. I want you guys to do. I want you guys to code a little bit with me, right? To figure some of this stuff out. The boundary's done. That was a good suggestion, but I want to make it so that we can get in there and, like I said before, change or check. I do want to do a boundary check within my code before I transform, right? I don't want to transform and then transform back. That would be bad. That would be like the shifting that we had yesterday. That's bad, right? Anybody? I'm going to give you another minute, and then I'm going to have to go get to it because it's 12:15. We only have till 12:20. today. All right, and then they're going to be banging at the door, chomping at the bit to get in, right? They're going to kick us out like I kicked them out last day, right? All right, so you guys aren't coming up with it. I don't see any motion here. Let's see what we can do. So first of all, we want to check before this. I want to do something called a boundary check. You know what? I want to call a method called boundary check in here. That's the right thing to do. So I'm going to say this, it's going to be a private method, _, boundary check. And I don't have a boundary check method, so it glows red right now. So we're going to make one down here, right? So I'm going to say private void _ boundary check. That's what's going to happen, right? Boundary check. And we're going to create a new method. That's the first thing. So this is my boundary check. What are we checking? We're checking the new position we've just calculated. Now, luckily, the new position is a private instance variable that we have access to. So even if we do it here, we have access to it outside of this method. So we're calling a method from within a method, right? That's okay. That's normal for us. All right, and then it's going to return control back to line 33 after it checks our boundary, right? So we're going to say if my new position, this dot underscore new position, right, dot x, that's what we're checking, right? If it's less than, right, the boundary lowercase, this dot boundary, right, dot x min, right, not x min, here it is. That's the check. If it's less than, equal to that, then guess what it's going to be? It's going to be equal to that. That's my new position. So I'm going to say this then dot underscore new position dot x is equal to this dot boundary dot min x min. There we go. All right, that makes sense, right? Because what I'm saying is check to see if it's beyond it. If it's less than it, then make it equal to it. I'm never going to be able to go beyond that. All right. Here's the next one. And you can see what this is going to be like, right? If dot this new position x is greater than, right, the x max, that's what it's going to be before I actually transform, right? Then I want to make it equal to the x max position, right? So remember, that's the middle position of my ship. I never want it to go beyond the boundary, right? And my x boundary is minus 290 and 290, right? All right, let's see if that works, if this whole thing that I'm trying to do works, right, before I kind of move on. All right, let's run this thing. If I've got it going on right, then I should be able to stop right when I get to this. See, I can't move forward. I can't move beyond this point. Same thing goes with this. My ship now, my plane, can never move beyond this point here at all because I'm trying to, and I'm moving slow enough that I'm okay. Here's the problem, though. What if my movement is very quick, like this? So here's my speed. I want to make my speed 10, right? And let's do it in gameplay so you see what I'm talking about. Whoop, whoop. Okay, does it stop me enough? And especially if I do this enough times, will it break the barrier and make me go faster, right? So here's speed of 10. Speed of 10 looks a little bit more desirable for me, but there's a problem. What's my speed? My speed, like, I'm just pressing the button once. Woo, woo. So there's an advantage and disadvantage to the speed. When my player banks, man, does he bank if I do 10, right? So speed of 10 probably still too fast. Speed of 5, just from an engineering perspective here, if I do this, right? I go back to the thing. That might be the right speed. 3 might be too slow. So 5 might be okay. It might be enough drift to make him to get him into trouble, but also get him out of trouble, right? 5. I'm trying to see if I can not get hit by that. Oh, I got hit by the cloud. Oh, I got hit by the cloud. Oh, I got hit by the cloud. See, it's really challenging, right? So 5 is a challenging speed. And you know, I also got to reconsider my cloud speeds. Is 10 really a reasonable speed for level 1 in this game? I can make a really hard game here, right? So I got to figure that out. That's something we have to discuss, but that's something we can modify later. So 5 might be the right speed for my player. I think that's good, and I think I'm pretty satisfied with how far we've gotten to today, guys. I mean, like we've gotten to our player controller, we've got our game controller. Here's a question for you before we depart: where do you think those system serializable scripts should be? Which object makes sense for it to be? I mean, this is pretty obvious, right? And I'll go to concept board to see if you guys can answer so people can actually hear you. And some people came up with some interesting suggestions. Here's math clamp. I like this. This comes right from the tutorial, right? Clamp it on the boundary. This will work actually, right? But what about the what about doing this? What about the ability for us to screen width? Oh, that's interesting. Screen width. We can use check the screen width and see if it's beyond the screen width. We could have done that, but we didn't do that. But what is another way to do the boundary check? Or where do we put all those system serializable scripts? Anyone have an idea before we go? And I need 1 more minute from you, then I'll let you guys all go. I promise, right? All right. I'm not going to see you next week, which is bad. I'm crying. Tears are crying, right? You know, really bad now. This is my favorite class, right? So, well, this one and the other classes. But anyways, right? But anyways, anyone have a recommendation, right? Well, the answer is probably is a good place. I know you guys aren't going to answer because you guys are like deep into your into what you're doing, right? The answer is probably the game controller. That's probably a good place to put all my system serializable scripts that I can choose to use or not to use, right? They don't have to be part of my other objects here. Okay, so for next week, while I'm updating GitHub, so you see all this stuff, I'm going to save my scene, first of all, file, save scene, so everything's done. I'm going to go into GitHub. Actually, I'm going to close off Unity to make sure that everything's closed off properly. And close MonoDevelop here for a second and go into my thing. I'm going to go git add dot and add it to GitHub. For next week, one thing that I want to talk about is collisions. We got to talk about collisions. Updated player controller. Controller script. I want to talk about collisions next week and some sounds because I know Jay, that'll make Jay happy if we do some sounds next week, right? I know Jay's the sound guy, right? And then git push origin master. So you have all my changes up on GitHub now, so that if that's something that didn't work for you, you can certainly download them. That's what I want to kind of do next week, and we'll continue with the concept board. I'm going to be using concept board whenever we do a broadcast. So even if you're not physically in class, you can still input. You can still put some stuff up there. Just don't mess anybody up, eh? Hey, who did that? Who put that up on concept board, right? We don't have anybody in the class. It's some other random dude that put it up there, right? So, but anyways, thanks so much. See you next week. Please work on your stuff. We're on here on Wednesday. Remember your project, your assignment number 1 is due next Friday, and I'm going to give you some other stuff next week. Another project that's going to be due 2 weeks from then. So if you don't do it by next week, you're going to be, bound with all kinds of extra work. Okay? Thanks so much, and see you next week.